I'll tell you just sort of a little bit about myself. So Josh said a couple things that I was going to he stole a little bit of my thunder, and that we did grow up about 10 minutes away from each other in New Jersey, but really took 3,000 miles to really get to know each other. Didn't know each other when we lived there, and so and it turns out kind of in a crazy, and speaking of social media, in kind of a crazy, weird way, we found out that we also had connections back in New Jersey, and his youth group leader was a guy that was in my homeroom in high school. And so it's kind of crazy. So it was sort of like, wow, you know this guy, how do you know this guy? So sort of a little crazy connection 3,000 miles away. That also tells you a little bit about how old I am. If Josh's high school youth leader was in my high school group, I'm wise. So anyway, yeah, I moved out here in 1997. Came out by myself to go to school. A few years after that, I started living with Josh Berg's sister after we were married. So got married in 2000, and we have, what's that?
Scandal.
I didn't mean to bring it up this way. And we have 2 kids. We live out in North Bend. We have Ellie, who's 9, and Maddie, who's 11. And it's kind of crazy to have a child in middle school. How many of you guys have kids in middle school? How many of you guys have been to middle school?
Oh, I don't know.
Less than I thought. So Maddie, she's in 6th grade, and she's doing cross country. And a couple cross country fans. I hate running. I think running is silly. But she loves it. My wife loves it. And so obviously, I mean, there's some sports fans in here. You guys sports fans? Played sports, heard of sports, watched some sports. So I played sports growing up. I played soccer in high school, which had some running. So, I played soccer in high school and college. It was super fun. I liked it. But what I didn't like was running. That was kind of the worst part of it. So, which is kind of weird to go with this story, because a couple years ago, I ended up doing a half marathon. And, yeah, so it wasn't my idea. It was actually, I think, Berg's idea. Ask him later if he actually ran in the half. So me and a couple of our other friends, we were all going to do it together. And so I signed up for this half marathon, and it's a gorgeous day. It was the first Seattle half rock and roll marathon that they had here, whenever that was. So I'm running, and I'm actually kind of doing pretty well, for the first 5, 6, 7, 8 miles. I feel pretty good. And I'm like, kind of just running things not so bad. And I got to 10 miles, and I'm like, oh, it's a little harder than I thought. And got to the 11th mile, and things were starting to hurt. I didn't like it much anymore. And then I got to mile 12, and I really hated it. And I wish I would have stopped at mile 10. But I didn't. I kept going, and that last mile really stunk. It really wasn't fun. And so barely being able to feel my legs cross the finish line, and that was good. It was kind of a good feeling. I finished. I had some friends say, oh, how was it? And it stunk. I hated it. I'll never do that again. And, oh, you'll get the bug. I'm sure you will. I'm like, no. Yeah, I won't. And I've not done it since. I'm done. I'm not doing that ever again. But it was quite significant for me because it was the first time I finished. I'm a chronic quitter. I quit at a lot of stuff. And it kind of grew up quitting. In 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I quit playing the piano because I had to do a recital, and I didn't want to. So I quit. And the teacher was kind of like, you can do a recital or you can quit. I quit. And then in 5th grade, I quit playing soccer. And I quit playing soccer in 5th grade because I was the goalie, and I hated playing goal. But I was pretty good, and no one else would do it. And so the coach said, you're going to play in the goal. And I said, no. And they said, you're going to, we're going to make you. And I said, no. So I said, I quit. So I quit. 7th grade, trumpet. Any brass players?
Here we go.
I do not know how to play the trumpet because I quit. So then in, 10th grade, 11th grade, somewhere around there, I was in Boy Scouts, and, kind of went through everything. I don't know if you guys know Boy Scouts, but there's all these, badges and stuff, and life is right before Eagle. I got to life, and then I quit. Yeah, sorry, Narky. Because it's hard, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And so, so I'm a notoriously just chronic quitter. And the thing about that is that God knows that I'm a quitter. He's always known that I was a quitter, and he's giving me several opportunities to continue to do stuff. And I have continued to select quitting over doing them. And I always thought that I quit for good reasons. I'm too busy, I'm too cool, I've got too much homework. But it turns out I really quit for 2 main reasons. One was fear. I was mostly just scared. Like, I didn't want to do a recital and mess up, so I didn't go in front of anybody and do that. So I was just scared of failing. And then 2, kind of just more laziness or just lack of preparation and putting in the hard work. So those kind of were 2 reasons that ultimately why I quit. But again, the thing about God is that if He has a lesson or something that He wants you to learn, you're gonna learn it, and whether in a way that might be a smooth and kind of maybe easy way, or maybe a not so easy way. Little kind of just side thing. In life, I kind of look at life and this is something that we're kind of going through church a little bit in the church that I go to, but they talk about 2 stories, kind of an upper story and a lower story. See if it makes sense to you. So upper story is kind of God's story, what's going on all the time, right? These 2 stories are happening simultaneously, every day, all the time. Can I get some water? That's not part of the story. That's just a dry mouth. So these 2 stories are going on at the same time, upper story, lower story. Upper story is kind of God's purpose, what He has, big plan, big picture. And then there's kind of the lower story. There's sort of the day-to-day life stuff that we do, whether it's going to school, going to work, checking Facebook, just whatever it is, distractions, stuff that we do. And the lower story sometimes can be really hard. Life sometimes is just really, really hard. And the thing about the game of life is that, which is different than all the other kind of games that maybe we choose from, whether it's sports or even in music, whether or not it's a game or whatnot, but the things that we choose to do versus sometimes a game of life puts us into a game that we didn't ask to play. Sometimes we're put in a situation that we didn't expect to come up, or we didn't want to, or we're just kind of thrown in a situation where you just weren't expecting it, and you don't really want to do it, and you didn't have a choice. And so, in those cases, there's no preparation, there's no training, there's no game plan. It just kind of happens. So in 2004, my wife gave birth to our second daughter, Ellie. Thank you. And so Ellie, I should have known from the beginning, was going to be somewhat exceptional, because her entrance into the world was certainly unexpected, and not unexpected in the sense we knew Summer was pregnant, and we knew she was going to have a baby. But what we didn't plan for and didn't know is that she was going to be born at our townhome in our bathtub, and I was going to deliver her. So that really wasn't part of the plan. My wife's labor was about 45 minutes. I won't go into details to spare Berg any kind of squirminess. But anyway, so I deliver my youngest daughter in the bathtub of our townhome. And overall, I think it went pretty smoothly. I don't remember that much. It was pretty stressful, and but there she was, and for the first several hours, we were planning on doing a homework, so that was kind of part of the plan. But because we had our first daughter at home, but the plan was to have it in this is too much, a birthing tub. Another not a bathtub. So anyway, so these people were, they were supposed to have this tub delivered. Our midwife was supposed to come over, and I was actually on the phone with the midwife because I called her and when this is all happening, and I said something is coming out in the bathtub, and my midwife is like, "You're gonna deliver the baby," and I'm like. So anyway, I did. Then we get a knock on the door, and the tub people come. Hey, we have your birthing tub. I'm like, we don't need it. We're good. And so they left, and midwife came and checked out the baby, and everything sort of was smooth sailing for the first 12 to 24 hours. At somewhere between 12 and 24 hours, Ellie stopped nursing. So so when you're born, you have a reflex. It's called a sucking reflex, but it's why you guys are all here. And so she kind of lost that. It just stopped. And sometimes when you're in infants, if they don't have enough blood sugar, they'll get really lethargic, and they just won't be able to do those things. So she became super lethargic. She stopped nursing. We tried to force feed her. That's not in a weird way. Right? Like, we didn't eat this. But, and sort of try to get her sugar back up so that she would actually nurse again. And it didn't work. And so we ended up going to the pediatrician the next day, and we walk into the office, and the doctor, I don't even know if we went back into the office, and the doctor said, you guys have to go to Children's Hospital. Now. So we did. I don't remember driving there. I don't remember much about that day and the events. I know that when we got there, they hooked Ellie up to an IV to get her some fluids and get her sugar up. And at the time, it's kind of this roller coaster, but at the time they were like, hey, she's perking up. I think she's going to be okay. We're like, sweet. But we want to keep her overnight, make sure she's stable and check things out. So Summer and I we stayed at the hospital, and that night, about 3 or 4 in the morning, we got a phone call. Ellie had stopped breathing, and they didn't know why. And so the next day is watching her breathe, trying to figure out why. She started having seizures, and every time she would have seizures, she would stop breathing. So they were kind of connected there. So the next days were just filled with tests and doctors and specialists and all kinds of people trying to figure out what's going on with Ellie. And kind of long story long, they'd never really kind of figured it out. No one really had a great diagnosis for her. The doctors ultimately said, we think she had a stroke. We're not quite sure why she had a stroke. But nonetheless, about 70 to 80% of her brain is damaged. And not a great prognosis of it. They didn't really know what was going to happen. They knew she would be able to breathe, but that was about it. They didn't know if she could eat. They didn't know if she could talk, walk, anything. So it was a pretty trying time. And for me, that was kind of, I'm talking about the game. This is kind of, to me, where a new game started. This was a new game, and I wasn't ready for this game. So we bring Ellie home, and we're kind of just start life with having a child that has a brain injury. And one of the things with her condition is that because her brain's through a ton of stuff, and cerebral palsy is what she was diagnosed with, which I don't know if you guys know. It's basically just a brain injury before the age of 2. That's all that really means. And it's not progressive, so it won't get worse. But and there could be people here that have cerebral palsy, and it can be super mild, or it can be pretty significant where you're wheelchair bound. But anyway, so one of the things in Ellie's case, she has really low muscle tone, and she, and because part of her brain that was injured, she didn't sleep. Infants in general don't sleep that well, but Ellie really didn't sleep. She would wake up every hour in what appeared to be pain, and she didn't know how to console herself. So, and I was kind of night duty guy. That was my job. And, so, gosh, for kind of jumping ahead for about 3 or 4 years, I don't think I slept a whole night. I honestly couldn't tell you on one hand the number of nights that I slept, and the game at that time was getting really, really hard. And I didn't really want to play anymore. I wanted to quit. But in this case, this game I couldn't quit. Because if I quit, Ellie dies, ultimately. So we couldn't quit. And I don't know if you guys could even imagine this, and sometimes it's even hard for me to realize it, but imagine being 100% responsible for someone else's life, where it doesn't matter if you're tired, it doesn't matter if you hurt, it doesn't matter what else is going on, you have a job. I don't want to call it taking care of kids a job, but it kind of, sometimes it isn't. But there's that responsibility there that you are 100% responsible. You have to be on your game all the time. And I didn't really want to be. But I kind of imagine that, or try to, and imagine, so I've got this one person that I'm responsible for, and then I kind of think about Jesus and millions and billions of people that you're responsible for, and all of these lives kind of depend on how you finish the game, and how you approach the game, and in Jesus' case, he knew that the ending was going to be the worst part. He knew that this was going to be the hardest time, the most challenging time. And that's kind of where we find Jesus in the situation at Gethsemane, which, I don't know if you guys know, it's a garden. It's called the Garden of Gethsemane. It's kind of just outside of Jerusalem. And it's a place where Jesus kind of went to pray quite often. But this case, it was slightly different. In this case, he is going there knowing that the end of the game is really, really close. He knows that the weight of the entire world is resting on his shoulders at this moment. And I part of me thinks that kind of in his humanness, and for just a second that he's there, that if it were possible, that he would adjust the game a little bit. Not give up and not quit, but change it and adjust it somehow. So I want to read this passage in Mark and then kind of listen to what he says here. So it says, this is Mark 14:32 through something, 42. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him. Those were kind of his 3 best friends. So it's kind of significant because the rest of the disciples kind of just hung out. There were 11 at this time, right? One of them left. And so he took these 3 guys with him, and they were his closest friends. And so it says, he took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. And he says, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. He said, "Stay here and keep watch." That's what he told his friends, right? Hey, hang out here because the end is coming. I need you to watch out for people. So he goes a little farther. He falls to the ground, and here's what he prays. He prays that if possible, the hour might pass from him. He says, "Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." So to me, I kind of read, and I'm like, ooh, that. There's a brief second there. He's like, I don't know if I can do this. But, right, not his will, God's will. And then he returns to the disciples and found them sleeping. Good friends, right? Hey guys, thanks for staying awake. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Which is kind of a silly question because he saw them sleeping. But could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. And when he came back, he again found them sleeping. Because their eyes were heavy, they did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. So, when I read that, and I have to be perfectly honest and say that when Josh asked me to speak about this, I didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about or how it really applied to me and my life. And this, it really, the more that I read this and kind of meditated on it, the more I realized that it really does apply. And I think for me it was, there were a couple of things. One, I just think in that moment there where Jesus has that 100% humanness, where he experiences this intense sorrow, completely overwhelmed, and I think for a moment, I think he really wanted the game to be different. And in Matthew, I believe, they tell kind of the same story, but they talk about Jesus being so overwhelmed and praying so hard that blood came out of his pores. He was sweating blood. I can't even imagine that intensity. I mean, just that this moment brings on him. And what does he do? He prays. He prays. And he says, take this but it's not about me. It's not my will, but your will be done. So he prays. He asks his friends for help, which I also thought was really cool. Now, his friends kind of let him down a bit, right? They fell asleep. Not once, not twice, but 3 times they fell asleep. But he asked for help, which I think as people sometimes we don't do often enough. But great example of Jesus at that time saying, I need you guys to be with me here. And I think the cool thing about that is that Jesus gets that our friends will let us down sometimes. God gets that our friends will let us down sometimes, but in that moment, in that hour, God won't let us down. And Jesus was able to use that moment and focus kind of on the upper story and realize that it wasn't about that the game had to be played and for a bigger purpose. And because he played the game and because he didn't quit, because he persevered through all of that, and because he ultimately bore the weight of everyone's sins on his shoulders and offered himself as the ultimate sacrifice, we have the opportunity to participate in a much bigger game, in a game of eternal life, and that's pretty cool. And in a way, kind of, Jesus bought your ticket for the game. You guys are welcome to come to the game. You just have to take the ticket. And so, it's been 9 years now, and Ellie still doesn't sleep through the whole night. She doesn't wake up as often, but she doesn't wake up, but she still doesn't sleep through the night. I don't know if she'll ever sleep through the night. No idea. I don't quite know when the game will be over, if it'll be over. And she's made some really great strides. She eats. She loves to walk around with some help. She has been learning to talk, so she'll mimic some words, which is really, really cool. So she's done a lot of stuff that no one really expected her to do. But I'm still really exhausted sometimes, and I'm still really It's hard work, but I can't quit. And to me, kind of the sports reference, to me it's fourth and long, and the long is long, but I'm gonna go for it.